So the Dracthyr Evokers are almost upon us, live on retail servers, and everybody's going to want to jump in and try the new class, both Devastation and Preservation. So today I wanted to make a very basic guide on Preservation Evoker, because this channel is mostly all about healing, and because we've covered Preservation Evoker on the beta and played almost 100 hours looking both at Mythic Plus and also Mythic Raiding in that testing environment. So today we're going to look at a very basic guide on how to play the class, what spells you should use, what spells you should prioritise, and look at the different talents for both Mythic Plus and Raid. Another mention, especially for the talent systems before we jump into there, is that they are based around being level 70, so for level 60 we're going to have to slightly adjust them, but we're going to base this guide off the fact that we are fresh level 70 ready to go. But in regards to the gameplay guide on how to play and what to pick, that will be very much applicable to level 60 as well, with some slight tweaks ready for when we get to level 70 and when we get our 4-set bonus. So this is what a basic talent system might look for a Mythic Plus environment. So when we're talking about talent systems for both Mythic Plus and Raid, what we also need to consider is picking talents that work best for you. So the guide you might see in front of you may not work for you, and you might need to adjust them. This is what works best for me, and I'll explain a little bit why I've picked those talents, because it might look slightly different to other guides that are out there. The biggest change what you might find with this guide over other guides is that people have opted to put in Renewing Blaze and also Fire Within. Now over the beta, the Dracthyr Evokers have evolved a little bit and we are less squishy, but I found more comfort in picking Draconic Legacy and Inherent Resistance because we get extra stamina and more magic damage reduction. Also because I have the tier set at level 70, and in Mythic Plus and Raid testing you will probably have at some point the 4-set bonus. I've put into Grace Period because it increases our healing by 10% with targets that have Reversion on, and of course the 4-set bonus is very much tailored around putting Reversion on as much and as many possible targets as you possibly can. What you might want to change with Grace Period is take a point out of there and pop it into Power Nexus, because it increases our essence up to 6 from 4, so we get an extra Echo charge, or in some cases we get an extra Emerald Blossom charge. And this is what we're going to be looking at for our talent system for Raiding. Now bear in mind, this one we have actually taken out of Draconic Legacy and Inherent Resistance and popped that in Renewing Blaze and Fire Within, and that is because mostly we're going to have a priest in our raid, so we're going to get extra stamina, and the magic damage taken reduction can be changed if needed, but this is what I felt works best for us. And for raiding our preservation points, we are taking out of Stasis in the bottom right talent choices and popping them into Dreamflight and Cycle of Life. We do that because raiding is all about the AoE healing more than anything, and Dreamflight and Cycle of Life that really focuses with our awesome gameplay is incredibly powerful, so we are going to be putting more into the AoE healing instead of a more single target. Now when we look at stat priority, we're going to be looking slightly different at both Mythic Plus and in Raiding. Raiding we're going to be looking at more crit and mastery, because mastery is incredibly strong, because as long as your health is higher than the person that you're healing, you do more healing to them, and crit of course for our massive empowered spells, we're going to need that. When it comes to Mythic Plus, I've been doing around 23% versatility for 10s and 15s, and that's been okay. So as long as you hit around that point for versatility, then you can play around with crit and haste, but make sure that mastery is still in there because it is incredibly important to have. When it comes to Mythic Plus, we want to use our essence on a spell called Echo. Simply put, Echo costs us 2 essences, and when cast on a player, you can then cast a healing spell on a different player, and like in the name, it echoes that healing spell on our original target. So in Mythic Plus environments, we'll focus less on our other essence spender, Emerald Blossom, and more focused on Echo. When it comes to the empowered spells, both Dream Breath and Spirit Bloom, we want to be using these as much as possible as soon as they come off cooldown, because they're incredibly powerful. With Spirit Bloom, and as we're talented into Spiritual Clarity, our cooldown on this is now reduced to 20 seconds. Because it is an empowered spell, depending on how long you press it, decides on how many players that it hits. As Dream Breath is a 30-second cooldown, and like I mentioned earlier, it can be either held for longer for a more instant heal and lower heal over time, or it can be held for less time and it offers a lower instant heal and a longer heal over time. I mentioned this is one of the spells we want to use in a rotation, as we are talented into Call of Ysera. Every time we cast Verdant Embrace, this makes our Dream Breath 40% more effective, so we want to be using these two together. Verdant Embrace is a 15-second cooldown, and because we're talented into Lifebind, we will be using this off cooldown and every 30 seconds tied in with Dream Breath. Because we have Call of Ysera, Verdant Embrace also increases our Living Flame as well, so in that 15-second time where we can't use Dream Breath, we can also use Fire Breath and then Living Flame to make that more powerful. Fire Breath, our only damage dealing empowered spell, you want to be casting that as much as you possibly can off cooldown, and you want to be holding that to its last empowered level. Because we're talented into Leaping Flames, this allows our Living Flame to hit additional targets either healing or damaging, depending on how many empowered spells we have on our Fire Breath. Talking briefly about Living Flame, this is our damage and healing filler when we have downtime. We want to only be using Living Flame when we are either waiting for essences to recharge, if we have no reversion spell to press, and our empowered spells are on cooldown. When it comes to reversion, this is our heal over time, and because we're talented a lot into improving the power of reversion, and when we get our 4-set bonus, Reversion becomes a very important cast. So we need to get into the habit of using every charge off cooldown as much as we possibly can. Our big cooldowns for Mythic Plus are Stasis, which is on a 1.5 minute cooldown, and when pressed it stores the next 3 healing abilities you cast, and when pressed again unleashes those spells. So it will be important in high damage situations to allow Stasis to only copy the powerful spells that we have. What I tend to do is pop Stasis, cast Spirit Bloom, cast Verdant Embrace, and then Dream Breath for that improved power. Then when needed, press Stasis again and it copies that. Our other cooldown we have that becomes incredibly powerful in dungeons is Rewind. When pressed at the right moment, it rewinds 50% of the damage taken. It is 100% more effective when not in raid groups, so we want to be saving this for our very high damage situations. Our other spell, Emerald Communion, this is a 3-minute cooldown. I honestly didn't use this early on and I regret not picking it as a talent, and if we put the talent choice underneath that, it allows you to move whilst casting. So it is incredibly powerful, and in the right situations you want to be pressing that as much as you possibly can. And yes, I regret not using that early on. Final mention to our powerful cooldowns is Tip the Scales, which when cast allows us to cast a full charge empowered spell instant. I tend to use this for Fire Breath in a multi-target fight situation, so I can then cast Living Flame on as many targets as it allows. I won't mention Time Dilation here, this will be included in our utility section later on in the video. When it comes to raiding, our rotation slightly changes in the sense that we now focus our essences on Emerald Blossom, and this is down to 2 reasons. One, we have talented into Cycle of Life, which means after every 3 casts of Emerald Blossom, a sprout appears and it stores 15% of our healing done in the next 10 seconds, then it bursts and heals targets over 30 yards. The second reason is that we're now talented into a spell called Temporal Anomaly, and the talent underneath that, which whatever Temporal Anomaly hits along the way, it applies Echo to the target. Now bear in mind, this Echo is not as powerful as if you were to actually cast Echo using Essence, but if played right, you can get Echo on a lot of players, and then through our empowered spells or Emerald Blossom casts, we can hit a lot of players. Our Reversion works the same in raids, and you want to be casting that on as many players as you possibly can. Another big change for raiding is a spell called Dreamflight. This is an amazing spell to use, and you want to be using it as much as you can. It can be used to heal as many people as possible, but it can also be used to avoid mechanics as an added bonus. Dreamflight is uncapped, and along your path you can heal anyone that it touches. Additionally, it also leaves a heal over time on them too. This is a very important raid spell, use it as much as you can. Now let's look at Preservation Evoker's utility, and within that our defensives as well. Starting with defensives, we have Obsidian Scale, which has to be talented into allowing us to have 2 charges. It's super important to our survivability. Now we look at Renewing Blaze. I mentioned earlier that you can either choose to have this or not, and it is on a personal preference level because it's a really good self-healing defensive tool to have. When it comes to our healing utilities, we have 2 good spells. We have Cauterizing Flame, which is a separate dispel to our 12-second basic healing dispel that everybody gets, and we want to be picking this as it not only dispels poison, it removes everything but magic and heals the target when you dispel one of those debuffs. Now remember to use this carefully as it is a 1-minute cooldown and our basic dispel only removes poison. Additional raiding utility, we have Zephyr, which is a spell that picks up 4 nearby players and reduces their AoE damage taken by 20% and increases their movement by 30%. Now this is probably going to be used in stacking situations. Now I mentioned Time Dilation. This is a spell for both Mythic Plus and Raid, and it works very similar to a Brewmaster's Stagger in the sense that you cast it on one player, usually the tank, and it breaks down 50% of the damage taken and it converts the damage to hit the player over 8 seconds instead. This is a 1-minute cooldown, use it as much as you can. Finally, our movement utility. We have Hover, which can be used twice if talented right, and that just allows us to cast while moving except for empowered spells. This is a key spell for our class fantasy, and we'll need to use this as much as we can to get around to cover for our 10-yard disadvantage compared to other healers. As a side mention, we do have an ability called Landslide, and it's generally used in Mythic Plus, and what it does, it just roots players in the target area that you choose. So you can choose to use that. It is situational, but if you are in a position where you don't have anybody in your group that can do this, we have that talent to pick. And as a final mention, we can't forget to mention that we have Bloodlust and Heroism because we are going to be replacing all Resto Shamans in all content. And that's it from me. I hope I answered all the questions for you in this very basic healing guide in regards to Preservation Evoker. If you still have some questions, please use the comment section down below and ask me whatever you like. I'll be more than happy to answer any questions. But as always, thank you for watching. My name is Ryfrost. Please consider subscribing to the channel. There's going to be a bunch more Dragonflight content along the way. And of course, a lot of Preservation Evokers because I'm pretty sure it's going to be my main moving forward. But please consider hitting that like button. I'll see you guys in the next video. Take care. Bye-bye.